No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live episode number 238. Happy Friday. Developing right now a mainstream media meltdown as the thick as mince establishment goons who have lied to us for decades about the threat of Islam, Brexit, COVID and trans extremism know they have lost the people. They don't know how to deal with it.
You just cast your mind back to Southport, and I remember Farage releasing that video as what is it that police aren't telling us, sowing suspicion in people's minds that there was much more to it than meets the eye. And as we have found out, the person who carried out the Southport killings was a deeply evil and troubled human being, but he was not Muslim, he was not an asylum seeker, he'd been in the country for a while.
For women's rights, and it's very important for
Well,
gay
I'm a
rights.
woman, and I'm telling you, I don't believe it's very important for my rights.
Well,
Right.
but you don't get to speak on behalf of all women.
No, but
And
I'm
of course-
telling you, you can't
do you
speak for
think
me.
Do you think it's acceptable then for male rapists to be in women's prisons?
No, but most
Well, there we
rapists
go.
are men.
Sorry?
Most rapists in the world are men, not trans
What
men.
difference does it
That's what you call losing the argument. Meanwhile, as the loose women blame mansplaining and misogyny for their overdue cancellation after going woke.
At the moment, all of us on screen are in work and are proud of what we do. But behind the scenes, there are people that are really suffering. And what you don't realise is when you attack the show, you attack them. Because you never see all the army of people behind the scenes and how hard they work. So to all my friends and colleagues behind the scenes that just got the most huge shock out of the blue, I'm so sorry. And Mark knows, don't you, how much of how upset I've been at home about it. I just can't bear it. So just be kind at people.
As Tommy Robinson said on his release from prison earlier this week, the mainstream media is the cancer and the independent media is the cure. So in my digest next, I'll reveal these shocking new tactics to come for Britain's political prisoner. Then, my Friday superstar panel weigh-in. Oh, look who's here. Great lineup. June Slater. She is, of course, a social media sensation on YouTube, Facebook and X. And Howard Cox. He is, of course, the bloke behind Fair Fuel. Also, the former London mayoral candidate for Reform UK. Also coming up on the show today, Bombshell new claims about the Ukrainian firebombers who targeted Keir Starmer that the MSM continues to ignore. And Adam Brooks hits back after an explosive on-air row on GB News where he is branded far right by a former Labour minister. Then in the uncancelled after show on Substack, Meghan Markle's mortifying podcast extension for a special guest. Nope, she hasn't secured Beyonce, but rather her mum. Beyonce's mum. Yep, I'm laughing about this one with Angela Levin, who's going to be here with all the royal news. You can sign up to watch www.outspoken.live. Of course, it's Friday, which means we're also going to unveil the worst Britain in the world this week. That's where your choices of Union Jackass from Monday to Thursday go head to head. And what a plethora of choices. From Monday, it was Gary Lineker. Tuesday, Narinder Kaur. Wednesday, Scheming Sturgeon, and Thursday, John Swinney. Now, do you know last week, we honestly had something like 90,000 votes. It's absolutely incredible. I haven't checked this week yet, but I'm sure there are tens of thousands in already. Get voting on the community tab on YouTube, and we will bring you the winner and your comments at the end of the show. But now, let's go. So the gaslighting is so out of control now that the ghouls in the mainstream media will literally tell you black is white to avoid discussing the real issues that we all know are tearing our once great United Kingdom apart. We know that these establishment shills have been impossible to trust since they backed the deep state attempts to overturn the biggest democratic vote in our history, Brexit, and take away our God-given rights forever during the COVID pandemic. Now, despite 2 decades of terror attacks, these muppets, these fake news merchants will tell us that the threat of this ideology is simply a construct. This is something made up by an invisible far right. No, that's right. We didn't live through the 52 innocents killed on 7/7 by Islamist suicide bombers, the brutal murder of Lee Rigby, the 22 poor souls, including an 8-year-old girl blown up at an Ariana Grande concert, the stabbing to death of the late great MP David Amess, or the latest attack at a Taylor Swift dance class by a man who had converted to Islam. No, all of that is just a creation, apparently a figment of our imagination, according to the despicable liars on the fake news agents John Sopel and Lewis Goodall, who used this week's Liverpool incident to gaslight us into thinking we're all mad. We're all completely mad and insane and bigoted for thinking that there are Islamists here illegally who want to commit genocide. Watch.
Leave aside even the far right element of it, just the pure sense of misinformation. I don't know, we've talked on the show before about how difficult that is and how difficult it is to put the genie back in the bottle. But frankly, we know, right? We know that if it had been a young Muslim or an asylum seeker or whatever it happened to be, we know there probably would have been violence because we played this story out before. We saw it in Southport, and that is precisely what the police, they were obviously cognizant of that, and that is exactly what they were trying to avoid.
Well, you just cast your mind back to Southport, and I remember Farage releasing that video as what is it that police aren't telling us, sowing suspicion in people's minds that there was much more to it than meets the eye. And as we have found out, the person who carried out the Southport killings was a deeply evil and troubled human being, but he was not Muslim, he was not an asylum seeker, he'd been in the country for a while, and yet people who should know better were going on X to say, oh, well, more to this than meets the eye. I bet it's a wrong one. I bet he's a troublemaker. I bet we'll find out which religion he's from.
And these people, by the way, sorry to interrupt, John, but these people have the gall, right, to attack the MSM for spreading misinformation, for spreading lies, all of this sort of stuff. These people hide in plain sight. Like, God knows, we both know, we talked about on the show, the quote-unquote mainstream media has got its problems and flaws and has done for many years. No one from any reputable broadcaster, let's just take the broadcasters for example, would ever do the sort of thing that we saw last night. Never. Because there is a sense of professionalism and a sense of actually wanting to impart accurate and truthful information at all times wherever we can. Yeah, of course, make mistakes, but never knowingly.
I mean, is he kidding himself? The mainstream media is in a death spiral because we know that they have been lying to us for the past decade. Now, Sopel is clearly not a journalist. He is a propagandist because Nigel Farage was absolutely right to speak out about the Southport police cover-up, like I did, by the way, every day on this show. Because to suggest Axel Rudagabana was a Welsh choir boy, as the mainstream media told us, is a bloody joke. Look at the facts. He had an Al-Qaeda training manual, he was producing ricin within his home, and as Tommy Robinson revealed to me, he is now a practicing Muslim behind bars at Belmarsh. But Sopel admits here that the establishment want to use these really draconian contempt of court laws to cover up information that we clearly have a right to know, and he bemoans the fact that the MSM has now lost control of the narrative.
I raised it with Andy as a question about, where does this leave the 1982 Contempt of Court Act? And quite often on this podcast, when we're doing a recording and, someone has been arrested or someone has been charged, there is a debate about what can we say? What are the limits of what we can say and what we can't say without falling foul of the law? And on X, you have open speculation with total disregard to that law. And the Contempt of Court laws are designed so that when a suspect who's been charged comes to trial, there can be a fair trial. And yet, it seems to me that it is such a redundant piece of legislation now in so many ways, because the mainstream media are not the only means by which people find out information. And I think the police have got a devil of a job, and lawmakers have got a devil of a job to work out how on earth you deliver fair justice, which everyone has got an interest in, when there are these grifters. And you talked about the profit motive. If it was only the profit motive that was driving them, you'd think, well, geez, okay, they're trying to make some money. It's not very pretty, but at least they are driven by politics. They are driven by
radicalisation.
The radicalisation. They want to sow discontent. They want to see riots on the streets. They want to see mosques burning. They want to see fires, cars aflame. That is their interest. And that was the interest of those people in Southport. And thank God Merseyside Police did do what they did yesterday. But as we discussed with Andy, it raises a difficult question in future. If someone fitting their preferred profile, i.e. a kind of Islamic asylum seeker.
I mean, where to begin? The only grifter is you. Firstly, well, actually, both of you. Total grifters, race grifters, because we don't want anything burning, okay? We don't want anything burning. But we do want our elite class and our political leaders to actually acknowledge that allowing uncontrolled mass immigration into our country and an invasion of our southern border has had a massive impact.
And honestly, these grifters have got the biggest cheek imaginable, right? They then, of course, as soon as the police issue this statement, which takes the wind out of their sails, at least to some extent, what's their next line? Well, it's two-tier policing. This obsession that they've got that policing in Britain is deeply racialised, right? Yes, they had a different standard this time. They did something different than in Southport. Why? Because of people like you.
Because of what happened in Southport.
Because people like you fanned the flames of racial and cultural division to such an extent that it resulted very often nearly entirely on the basis of lies.
Lies. I mean, can we just remember that these are the same so-called journalists who spent decades covering up the Pakistani Muslim rape gang scandal in the aid of community cohesion? And now these same so-called journalists are using the victims of that abuse to try and turn on Elon Musk and Tommy Robinson, who they have decided are the real problems. So this has been revealed by Elizabeth Harper, who is a victim. She posted yesterday, proper pissed me off. A random journalist ringing me, asking me about my story, and then halfway through asks me my thoughts on Tommy Robinson and Elon Musk. Is that how we are measuring survivors now? Not on their experiences, but if they agree with them? What the actual F? My answer, Musk did a good thing. He gave us a voice and a platform again. That's not a bad thing. He did us a favour. Tommy Robinson has given a voice to many that feel like they haven't got a voice after doors being slammed in their face. Their answer, so you agree with some of it, but not the racist bits. Like effing seriously? No, I agree that survivors deserve a voice and deserve to be heard. Maybe if the media actually kept it in the limelight and helped survivors with their voices, then maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to seek it elsewhere. Newly freed Tommy Robinson, for now at least, in response to that, posted, "The media are the enemy of the people. So-called journalists are going to survivors of sexual exploitation, not for their stories, but for their opinions on me and Elon Musk." Let that sink in for a moment. But here's the thing, the nutters in the MSM are losing. They know they're losing. But my God, they're going down with a vile fight. And it's really horrifying to watch. So let's take Yasmin Alibaya Brown, a woman whose entire life has been through the privilege of arriving in the United Kingdom as an immigrant. But she has blamed white men for trying to shock horror, present women against men pretending to be women when faced down with common sense from Andrew Doyle on the Jeremy Vine Show.
White men are claiming back the world, and this trans issue is at the heart of it. Trans issue is really difficult. And Lady Hale, who's a very important judge, has already said that the judgment is being misinterpreted.
So that's a very good example of what I talk about in the book, actually, because throughout the woke era, we've had people saying things that are factually wrong in positions of power. I mean, Yasmin mentions Lady Hale. Lady Hale said the other week, I've been speaking to doctors who say that biological sex doesn't exist. Well, by the way, I would advise no one to go to those doctors, because if you don't know that there are two sexes in the human race, then you shouldn't be a doctor. And that's a former president of the Supreme Court saying something that is just absolute and arrant nonsense. Now, the woke movement did destabilise this notion of truth and fiction. It made us obsessed with the idea of race, gender, sexual orientation. It divided us more than ever before. And the key thing about woke, I think, which is often forgotten, I know Yasmin has written about the political correctness era, which was a kind of messy negotiation towards a revision of a social contract. The woke era added authoritarianism. It said, we're going to bully you. It said,
rubbish.
well, there's a thing called cancel culture.
This is rubbish.
There's a thing called
White
cancel
men,
culture, Yasmin.
It's very interesting. This week, a lot of white men complained. Did you read this in the newspapers? We're not getting the jobs. We're being excluded from shortlists.
No, but
it's
that's
happening.
true.
It's happening to us. And women, quite rightly, wrote columns saying, join the club.
I mean, she hates men, doesn't she? She really hates white men. But this is a woman who is actually so infected by woke and the woke mind virus that she is now trying to justify attacks on women by men.
But let's hate trans, okay? I do
You
not.
said that. I've not said that.
No. The atmosphere has been appalling.
The trans thing, surely it must be quite a small part of this, because there are so
Well,
few
he
people
based
who are
his
trans.
entire thing on the trans issue.
Yeah, but
Well, it is quite important, though, and it's very important for women's rights, and it's very important for
Well,
gay
I'm a
rights.
woman, and I'm telling you, I don't believe it's very important for my rights.
Well,
All right.
but you don't get to speak on behalf of all women.
No, but
And
I'm
of course-
telling you, you can't
do you
speak for
think
me.
Do you think it's acceptable, then, for male rapists to be in women's prisons?
No, but most
Well, there we
rapists
go.
are men. Most rapists in the world are men, not trans
What
men.
difference does it make? There's no evidence whatsoever that trans-identified males are any more or less of a risk to women than men who don't identify as trans. So
Is
you
it-
just, so you, for
can you just-
safeguarding purposes,
can you- I
keep
did-
men out of women's.
Okay, so it's the men who are really to blame. I mean, real champions of women, rightly disgusted by this woman. Julie Bindel posted, Yasmin really has jumped the shark recently on this topic. I get that she wants to be liked and not have hate and hassle, but she just sounds thick as mince. J.K. Rowling went one step further. Most rapists are men. So some rapists are lady men? Jesus Christ, I'm done. I will never again trust any women who gave a toss about being called a TERF. Yasmin is losing the argument. She knows it. She's being exposed as a thick as mince mess. But can she admit that? Of course not.
Obsessed with group identity, and we're going to push it through authoritarian means. It was a very top-down, upper-middle-class movement. Look, it's a $9 billion industry, is the DEI industry. It's pushed by capitalists, it's pushed by
DNI
corporate.
is not woke.
DEI.
DNI is
DEI.
redress for historical injustices and power holding,
Well-
which, sorry, it's nothing to do with woke.
let me
It
hold
is
up
to
the book.
readjust
We're
the world.
Oh no, DEI has nothing to do with woke. The woman's lost the plot. I mean, as Tommy Robinson said on his release from prison earlier this week, the mainstream media is the cancer and the independent media is the cure. Let me tell you, Yasmin Alawaya Brown and the fake news agents will never again be able to claim the moral superiority. Now, the superstar panel. So brilliant to have Howard Cox and June Slater in the house. I mean, Howard, can we just kick off with John Sopel literally telling point blank lies, trying to make up that Nigel Farage was living in some type of fantasy world when it came to Axel Rudy Cabana? No. It was all covered up. I mean, yes, it was covered up that he was Muslim, that he had an Al-Qaeda manual. The mainstream media still won't acknowledge that. But it was also covered up that he was known by the Prevent program, for example. I mean, the whole thing was a monstrous cover-up. So he is just point-blank lying there.
Absolutely right. I remember coming on your show telling you about what I learned about
Yes.
that. And Nigel was, honestly, Nigel Farage was dead right to say something's wrong here. And all he was asking is say, can we have the truth right then and there? And that's what's happened now. John Sopel is being paid for by the taxpayer. Our licence fees are paying for that man's idiocy. And I watched him on several occasions, and honestly, it makes me physically sick what he's trying to do. And you're dead right. And thank you for highlighting it, Dan, yet again about this, because the independent media, you guys, you're leading the way, are telling the truth. I'm afraid mainstream media are not telling the truth. And Sopel leads the queue of liars. I see it all the time. I mean, I get it a lot from, I get death threats, all sorts of things from the left and the Greenies, because I support, dare I say it, diesel and petrol cars, which are killing the planet. These
Put
are
you
the
in the
sorts of
gallows.
things
Be done with you. What a terrible thing. Yeah, cars are also the enemy, by the way. White men and cars are the real enemy for these people. I mean, June Slater, it's just astonishing to me. I mean, by the way, thank God, can we just say that John Sopel is no longer paid for by the British Batting Corporation, but of course he was for years and years and years. But good God, June, for him to sit there and say that Nigel Farage was wrong, to point out what I still believe is one of the biggest cover-ups in modern British history. It's astonishing, June.
Well, he's just gaslighting everyone that's listening to him. And unfortunately, his audience is diminishing. They're obviously an online source now. They used to be mainstream media on the telly. And I've watched him a few times. A couple of years ago, I saw him in an interview where he condemned kind of right-wing commentators for suggesting a sweeping statement that, well, you're suggesting, I can't remember the words exactly, that all Muslims are terrorists. He's now doing exactly the same. He's making a sweeping statement suggesting that anybody who's got a Twitter account is a right-wing extremist just looking for trouble and physical violence. Well, I've managed to blog for the last 10 years and accrued 450,000 followers. I've never even gone to a demonstration. I've never suggested one violent act at all. And I've never taken any money. So where do I fit into that category? He's generalising.
He'd probably call you far right, June.
Yeah, well, he would do, wouldn't he?
He'd call you a far right grifter. And as you've just said, you have not taken one penny.
No. And he said they could understand it if they took money, but they're just doing it for politics. Yes, a lot of people like me are doing it for politics because people like him have proved to be unreliable and projecting a narrative rather than a balanced opinion. They're not, it's gone. The media's finished. The mainstream media is finished. You're watching the embers of a fire dying out. That's what's happening with them. And soon they'll all be surplus to requirements as
well, absolutely. And to be honest, I mean, remember, I was part of the mainstream media for 2 decades, but I do not mourn its loss at all, Howard. And when I see Tommy Robinson pointing out with this survivor of the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs that we now have journalists who are literally spending their time to try and get survivors to slag off Tommy Robinson and Elon Musk, that's their priority?
Well, that's the gutter press, the gutter media. I cannot believe they sink to that sort of level. I mean, June, bless her cotton socks, I've admired her for years and years and years. She speaks for the majority. And she does it from her, from a lounge seat there. And she talks, and I watch what she says and sees what she says. I think 99 things out of 100, I agree with her. I don't with the BBC. I don't with Sky, Sly, as you call them.
Sly News.
Yeah, and Tommy, I'm so pleased to see Robinson Crusoe come out and turn into a really dapper sort of city man after he's had his shave. He looked great after that. But what he's saying, he's dead right. Independent media is going to take over. And honestly, Dan, you are leading the way. And I'm so proud to be on here. I've just done a couple of podcasts with Peter McElvenna. I did him a small. Great. Yeah, and those sorts of things, and we talked about a lot of issues. He went through my Twitter feed about various subjects, and I've forgotten what I've done, but I should be serving a life sentence for what I've said online.
Well, probably soon you will be, Howard. You'll be the next political prisoner. But no, that's the thing. The more brave we all are, the harder that is going to be to turn us into the new Lucy Connolly. June, I've got to ask you about Yasmin Al-Brown, right? Because that was astonishing, wasn't it? Like her visceral anger towards Andrew Doyle, who's simply just trying to say, well, look, don't women have a right to be protected from men, be it trans men? And so her argument is like to say, well, most rapists are men, not lady men. I mean, it's nuts.
I've got to say, I absolutely love that. Most rapists are men. Wait till I tell my husband he's a man. He'll be absolutely thrilled. Put that handbag down. She loses a lot of arguments, actually, and all she does when she's losing, she talks over them. Have you noticed?
Oh, yes,
she does what
I've
your
been
nana
there.
would
I've
do.
been there with that bloody woman. It's impossible to argue with.
She's belligerent, and it's a really unattractive quality. She's not interested in debate. She doesn't sit quietly while someone else speaks. She just talks over them. And she's had a bloody good life out of this country. And the way she goes on about white men, it's just ridiculous, because it's a known fact, even Theresa May said it, that young white schoolboys are the ones at the back of the queue for chances and opportunity. Theresa May said that. And how long ago was that? 2017, 18? They're still at the back of the queue because everything's focused on, we mustn't upset certain sections of the community. And if you can promote someone with an ethnic background, that makes you a really good person. What you should be doing is employing people who can do the job. Just meritocracy will do. That's where you find a strong country, not people, I want a pilot to fly my plane who can fly it if it's going to crash. If it's going to crash, I want someone who's going to do it the best he can, she can. I don't want someone sat there because actually 3 lined up, 2 were really qualified, but 1 has a better skin colour. That just does not make sense. And as you know, Silicon Valley are dumping DEI right now. They're keeping it quiet.
Breaking right now, shock new claims over the mainstream media cover-up of the Ukrainian adjacent firebombers of Keir Starmer's property. Now, you'll know that these are 3 young men, aspiring models. There's been some question on that front about their past and exactly what they were doing in the United Kingdom, how they had this connection to Starmer. But what has been most shocking to me is to see the mainstream media yet again just decide, this isn't a story. Nothing to see here, folks. Let's hide behind the contempt of court laws and just say nothing. And then, as very shrewd observers of this story have pointed out, what they'll end up doing is be pressured into pleading guilty, and then we'll never find out what was really going on here. Well, one person who isn't prepared to play by those rules is the former Conservative MP, Andrew Bridgen, who, as Cat A pointed out, dropped a bombshell about the 3 rent boys connected to Starmer. A former Ukrainian Secret Service agent says the boys were gathering information from UK politicians and passing it on to the Ukrainian dissident Portnov, a challenger to Zelensky, who was assassinated in Madrid 4 days after their arrest. The plan is to replace Zelensky and continue the war. We'll get analysis on this that you certainly won't receive in the mainstream media from our superstar panel, June Slater and Howard Cox, in just one moment. But first, watch Andrew Bridgen's bombshells. He's speaking here to the New Zealand dissident journalist, someone who, like me, was in the mainstream media but has now gone independent, Liz Gunn.
There's also the situation with Starmer has been very interesting, and it's not just what the media are saying, but what they're not saying. So three Ukrainian male models have been arrested for arson attacks on Keir Starmer's property, and they all had accounts on Grindr, interestingly enough, apparently, which have all been deleted. And there are obviously some questions about Keir Starmer's private life and his relationship with Lord Ali, who's openly homosexual. But what the media aren't hearing, and I saw a report on this, it was actually from Vasily Poroshkov, the whistleblower to me about the child trafficking from Ukraine, the former Ukrainian Secret Service agent. Yes. And he claims that the 3 Ukrainian rent boys were gathering information from senior politicians in the UK, and they were passing them to the Ukrainian dissident in Madrid who was mysteriously assassinated 4 days after their arrest.
Oh, this is
and he would have seen himself as a potential challenger at the next presidential elections in Ukraine. And what I'm hearing is that they're clearing the decks, and that the preferred candidate, when Zelensky has, I think, shot his bolt, but the preferred candidate for the globalists is the gentleman who's now serving, he's former head of the Ukrainian armed forces, and he's now serving as the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, and that he'll be the next president. And the war will continue.
Now, Howard Cox, the thing here is that, okay, there are contempt of court laws, so we have to be honest with our audience that there are certain things in regards to the crime itself that if we were to talk about, we could be found in contempt of court. We could suffer like Tommy Robinson and end up behind bars. And I think it's important that we point that out to the start. But that is in terms of the crime itself. Now, we've seen, for example, some of the mainstream media try to link these three men to Russia. So why on earth is there not a proper examination going on as to whether they did have any connections to this Ukrainian dissident Portnov who was assassinated? And also, by the way, Howard Cox, and I don't know the answer to this, but if Andrew Bridgen is correct and they were on this gay sex app Grindr and they are or were rent boys, I don't see how at all their background in that regard would be in contempt of court, specifically to the crime in regards to firebombing. So I would argue that the mainstream media are doing what they often do, which is they're just choosing not to cover a story.
Well, Dan, thank you for warning me for a bit, because I'm privy to some information about this, and I'm not going to say it here now. But Andrew Bridgen is almost got it spot on. Obviously, these three aren't men, are they? So when we look at this situation, what's happening is it's being covered up again. Something's being covered up. Suddenly we got a Russian influence. Then it's the Grindr, the rent boy story, and all those sorts of things. When you put this all together, it just stinks again. And for some reason, Starmer still keeps coming up smelling of roses, less and less of a fragrance day by day. But the man seems to be bulletproof in terms of the mainstream media. They should be asking direct questions. Who are these people? Did you know them? Etc. And he should be issuing a statement, and hopefully, the various legal people that advise him, will tell him how to answer those questions. But we're not getting the truth again, Dan.
No, of course we're not. I mean, June Slater, these three men, Roman Lavranchov, 21 years old, an aspiring model. Stanislav Kaporik, 26, a Ukrainian-born Romanian national, also an aspiring model. And Petro Pochnikov, 34, a fashion entrepreneur. I mean, not the types of people that you would usually expect to be connected to firebombing of the Prime Minister's house. But what I just find extraordinary, June, is that as far as I've seen, there's no mainstream media asking Starmer or pushing Number 10 on this story.
What's that last one called? Pochnikov? Is that like spatchcock chicken? Any complaints? Gitufsky shitsky. In an effort to avoid prison food, I think that the least said about the actual firebombing is, or whatever they've done, arson, is the better route. But usually arsonists are in dirty parkas and living rough and really bitter and twisted about getting evicted from some squat. Arsonists aren't generally as well groomed as these men. Something stinks, doesn't it? Something, the smelly stuff is all around, but obviously the mainstream media aren't touching it. Is there a D notice out? I don't know. It just seems a bit odd to me, very odd indeed.
Well, of course.
And the way Andrew, he rings me sometimes as Andrew Bridgen, and I always think, what next? Because it's always something really quite like, you're joking. I think he's the individual I've said the words "you're joking" to more than anybody on the planet. And obviously, he's a grown up, isn't he? It's not like I'm getting this from some dodgy cartel.
No, he was
stinks.
completely. I mean, Andrew Bridgen, who was someone completely accepted by the establishment, by the way. As long as he was a Conservative MP, they were totally fine with him. As soon as he started speaking out about the COVID madness, he was immediately cancelled. So that's a really interesting one to me. And look, we'll keep on the story as much as we can. Obviously, just accepting the fact that because of these ridiculous, ludicrous contempt of court laws, there are limitations. However, what I would say is that these contempt of court laws are actually becoming dangerous to British society because we still don't know the full truth about Axel Ruder-Cabana. Do you remember the media promised, we're going to tell you the truth about Axel Ruder-Cabana and his family and how they got here and everything after he's been convicted? We do not want to risk the trial collapsing. Well, do we know the truth now, months and months after the conclusion of the trial? Of course we don't. However, what I do think we have seen this week is the end of Keir Starmer's premiership. And really interesting things are now going on in the mainstream media because they have now accepted, I think, that this guy, this chameleon, is a busted flush. And very soon, all of their efforts are going to be towards pushing Angela Rayner to become a left-wing, a true left-wing Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And of course, this also means that the scrutiny is going to increasingly come on Nigel Farage, who Keir Starmer admitted yesterday was now his number one rival to be Prime Minister. Now, Farage is loving it, as Farage does. He posted, "Why are you so obsessed with me, Keir Starmer?" And then added, "The Prime Minister is resorting to dirty tricks borrowed from the 2016 referendum campaign to attack me. This is Project Fear 2.0. Now, I have to say, Starmer's speech in the factory was utterly bizarre, completely bizarre. Trying to be a man who's, caring about the working classes, then almost like immediately trying to attack Farage. It just didn't work. The optics of this was so bad. Watch.
And only this morning, actually, you explained to me that the India deal in particular will be really important for glass and what you're doing directly, and of course for businesses like Whiskey who need glass all of the time. And that comes from my absolute determination to create jobs, good jobs, and to drive down the cost of living and put more money in your pocket, which is, I think, the thing that most people are most concerned about. That's what drives me, but you can't say that about Nigel Farage.
So awkward. Nick Dixon was totally right on this. He posted, "This press conference is so weird. Starmer tries to segue from a friendly chat about glass making to a hit job on Farage." But June, it really does feel like even the mainstream media that have been in the tank for this Prime Minister for so long are now realising that the game is up.
Well, he's going down like a pint in the desert, isn't he? He couldn't go down any quicker. Nigel Farage did a montage of how many times he used his name in that press conference, 16 times. That's obsessive. That's not what you want to see from any leader who's so focused. What you should be doing, you're a leader of a country, you've got a product, your product is governance. You should be concentrating on what you can do for people. People would ignore Nigel Farage because what you're doing is so good, he'd go into the wilderness. Nigel comes to the forefront because what people are doing, they're going, well, hang on a minute, he's saying what I want to hear, not you. You're not saying anything I want to hear. He's not for the working man, the small business, the medium-sized business, the large business, the students, the pensioners, the military, the fisheries, people who voted for Brexit. He's just gone against the whole country. Someone said he doesn't read the room. I don't think he's even in the room. He's just the worst leader we've had in so long. There is an upshot to this. He's that bad. His own voter core base is turning against him because they message me on Facebook because they're not afraid, because I don't take the mickey out of them. They will come round and say, "Oh, June, actually, I voted for him and I wished I hadn't." He's losing it. He'll only have London, central London, and the lovies left, and civil servants. No one wants him.
Yeah, and remember, June, he's even obviously losing the Muslim vote because politics in this country is becoming increasingly sectarian. But look, I think today we're agreeing too much on everything so far today. So Howard and June, there's a split here, and I want to get into this split, okay? Because look at this from Inevitable West, who posted on X, breaking, Rupert Lowe is now polling higher for Prime Minister in the Red Wall amongst 18 to 24-year-olds than Deputy PM Angela Rayner and Tory leader Kemi Badenoch. This is nothing short of a revolution. More on this from World by Wolf, who wrote a Merlin strategy poll of 1,000 Red Wall voters shows 6% select Rupert Lowe as their preferred PM. Rupert has been in politics less than a year and doesn't even belong to a party at the moment. Robert Jenrick is on 8%, so watch out for a Jenrick-Lowe partnership coming soon. Basil the Great also said Farage takes lead over Starmer, but Rupert Lowe already on 6% despite not announcing his political intentions. This could get interesting. Okay, Howard, so you must be looking at this presumably thinking, wow, we've got a shot here with Rupert Lowe. Because remember, for a long time, everyone was just saying, oh, Rupert Lowe, he's the online right. No one knows about him outside of X. This polling is quite something, isn't it?
It's good to see. I mean, but it's the making of problems of reform itself. I'm not going to blame Nigel. I'm going to blame the reform headquarters allowing this to happen. We've seen the CPS drop the charges against Rupert. I'm close to Rupert. He's a good friend. I've known him for a long time. And, you know, as I said to you when I stood for London Mayor, you know, and I was a guinea pig for reform. I had no help, no support whatsoever. And on the day I was elected, no, I'm sorry, I wasn't elected. The day I actually went to place my vote in Westminster, no one turned up from Reform headquarters whatsoever. No one except Rupert Lowe, and he came and I, you know, and Ben Habib has always been very close. And obviously, one of the things that really upset me was Nigel didn't declare himself as leader of the party when I was standing for mayor. He wasn't in sight. And he didn't even put anything out to say this guy. He wanted me to stand as London mayor. In fact, he told Richard Tice, who invited me to stand as mayor, it's the best idea he never had. And I was very chuffed by that because obviously it fitted in with Fairfield UK, the ULEZ expansion, all those sorts of things fitted well. But I've grown up a bit. I was naive about various things. I still think reform is the only option. I agree with Katie Hopkins. It's the monster we got to elect because frankly, the Tories are dead and buried. Who I've voted all my life. I'm a Thatcherite. I go back that far, and also, you know, Labour are just actually dying of death as through Starmer. And June is spot on about the way she described that. My point about Rupert is that I hope he's working his butt off. He's doing a great job of what he's doing, and I hope. Somehow in the long term things will come back together because the right is so split, it's unbelievable.
So June, what do you want to pick up on there? I guess can you acknowledge, June, what Howard's saying, which is that the way that Reform UK threw Rupert Lowe under the bus was really unwise?
No, because I don't see it as being thrown under a bus. I see a chain of events unfolding. And the first event I was aware of was Rupert going to a Tory journalist. Now, everybody's concentrating on the police thing with Zia and Rupert, which I think is awful. I don't know how the hell that ever happened. But nevertheless, the first thing that I saw was I looked at that story and I thought, oh, good grief, man, what have you done? You're doing well, you're popular, you're growing. Nobody knew you. I started retweeting you, as many others did. We loved what he was doing. I still love what he does on various things in Parliament. I think he's as much to blame for the split with Reform as anyone. And obviously, I'll get a shed load of stick on your thread for saying this, but I'm not too concerned. What I'm bothered about is the practicalities of what's going on with the country. Currently, and I'm not saying this as a blind Reform supporter or a blind Nigel Farage fan. I'm saying this as someone who's monitored politics because I want to save what I've built up for myself. I don't want it to be taken off me in taxes. And currently, the only vehicle that can get me out of this mess is the Reform Party, headed by Nigel Farage. Now, what's been going on? I did a poll. I did this on purpose, actually. I don't know if you can see it. I did one.
I'm blind, but I'm sure people can. But read it out to me, June.
Right. I did a poll specifically for Twitter because that's where the bulk of Rupert's support is. Not because people don't like him anywhere else, but because that's where he's known the best. So I thought, right, I'll do a poll. Would you, because I have no axe to grind with Rupert. I grind my axe strong and hard with the Tory party. Would you consider voting Tory if, blah, blah, blah? No, I'll vote Reform was one option. Yes, if Rupert Lord joins them. And yes, I'll vote Tory anyway. No, I'll vote Reform was 81%. Yes, if Rupert Lord joins them, 17%. And yes, I'll vote Tory anyway. Don't know who they are. 2%. Obviously, they could be posting from an asylum, couldn't they? You never know. 5,613 votes came in that. And I know that I had it up for 24 hours. I did that just to see what the feel was. My dream team would be Rupert back, Howard, Mayor of London. What a great future we'd have. It's not going to happen. But to say that they've thrown him under a bus, I think what Farage is trying, this is the other bit that's wrong, really. The leader, Farage, whoever he is, should be protected by the party so he can deliver all the good news. But it ended up Farage getting doorstepped by various journalists to talk about Rupert. And I'm sure it's not a position he wants to be in, but, Rupert's picked up the gauntlet pretty handily and defended himself remarkably well, obviously through his social media accounts and going on podcasts. But I cannot forgive him for going to, above all else, Tory boy. And, this is what I would have done, Howard, and I know we don't agree on this, but if I was Rupert Lowe with his credentials, his ability, his oratory perfection when he speaks, he's a man you want to listen to, I would have kept me gob shut, stayed in the party and got it somewhere near the finish line. And then I would have had a position for myself. Whatever's going on with Reform, it is not that bad. It is not that bad because the people want it. Whether the people
June, I actually agree with virtually.
I know. I think he wanted us not to agree.
I know, but the thing is, with Rupert,
no, I like this. We're tackling it. We're tackling it. It's good. I guess the one thing that I really viciously do disagree with June is that they didn't throw Rupert under the bus, because I think as soon as you report someone to the police, right, which is what Zia Yusuf did, for hurty words, then you've gone to a whole other level. Because that's where I think Rupert gets a lot of sympathy, because at the end of the day, they wanted to destroy him. They wanted to take away his liberty. They wanted to take away his freedom. I was reading Alistair Heath in the Daily Telegraph this week, and he makes the point that actually, he's very pro-reform and Farage and Zia Yusuf and Richard Tice, me. But he makes the point, there has to be 20 more of them. Do you know what I mean? And 2 of those people, or 3 of those people, could have been Howard, Rupert Lowe, and Ben Habib. So where are these 20 people coming from? Where are these big names that can be the Home Secretary, etc.?
To be honest, I think you're falling into the trap of what the mainstream media are doing. It doesn't matter at this stage. George Soros funds as much money into councils in America and different countries, into the lower echelon of government. A lot of his money goes into council elections to steer it from the bottom. And whilst all this online ruckus has been going on, you've got to allow some jurisdiction for the fact that Nigel Farage and a very small team of people have managed to set up 400 branches, over 1,500 volunteers, send off 3,000 freedom of information requests about council spending, and secure the running of 10 councils. If you think of government as a pyramid, he's nibbling at the foundations at the bottom, and that's a good thing. And he's been, I won't say distracted, focused is the right thing, whilst Ben and Rupert have focused on themselves, on getting their own arguments about why they should be in a better position than they are. They haven't had any of that work to do. They haven't assisted in any of that work. They haven't promoted any. In fact, Ben Habib, for me, was a terrible, you talk about being handed to the wolves. Ben Habib actually made a video to tell people not to vote for Sarah Pochin in that Labour stronghold, Runcorn, and so she was going to be up against it. and she got in with 4 votes. Then there was a recount. She got in with 6 votes. She's obviously proven herself to be very good. She's done more on immigration in the short time she's been in office than the previous Labour did in his whole entire tenure. So this business of trying to do reform harm is a massive mistake at this stage in the game. And thank God you couldn't unseat what's he called? Can't remember his name. Nigel Farage, as if Keir Starmer hasn't reminded me enough what he's called. It would be a huge mistake because nothing else is ready. It's like taking a cake out of the oven and it's still gooey. You're not ready, put it back in. And then when you've got something sorted out, you're all concentrating on the top men, the top end of government, who's going to be a cabinet, who's going to be a finance minister. I don't give a monkeys. I want to see more councils get control. How the hell are you going to run a country if you don't control the councils? And I wouldn't even put it past Keir Starmer coming up with something really, really awful. I'm talking war. I'm talking putting us on a war footing to avoid elections.
Oh, totally. We saw them do it this year, didn't we? We saw them do it this year. Developing right now an astonishing on-air row between Adam Brooks, the GB News panellist, and ex-Labour MP Bill Rammell has caused an explosion. James Melville summed it up on X, writing, here's ex-Labour MP Bill Rammell labelling commentator and pub owner Adam Brooks as far right. It's the same lazy smear tropes over and over again. And it's one of the reasons why so many people right across the UK are fed up with derogatory accusations like this. Adam was furious. He posted on Sunday evening, a former Labour minister called me far right just for wanting secure borders and no illegal immigration. Tonight, the Labour Attorney General has labelled Tories and Reform UK as Nazis. Labour are finished. They are completely detached from the average Brit. Now, the Attorney General has had to walk back that despicable Nazi comment, but it does show you, doesn't it? We're seeing this all the time. The fake news agents, James O'Brien, all of us, ordinary Brits, are now being labelled as far right. So I wonder if it's just time that we almost reclaim the label in the same way that J.K. Rowling reclaimed the label TERF, trans-exclusionary radical feminist. I mean, if anyone is going to suggest for a single second that someone like me is far right, I would argue that they are finished in terms of putting forward anything that is factually relevant at all. However, when this bust-up did happen on GB News, you could absolutely understand the visceral anger coming from Adam Brooks. We're going to get reaction from June Slater and Howard Cox in just one moment, but first, watch this bust-up.
By the way, I will say he's not far right. All right, but others, and therefore they're putting out a holding statement saying we're monitoring the situation. What makes far right? Bill, am I far right? Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely bonkers. No, I'm not. Far right. Yeah, if you look at any classical... What makes me far right, Bill? If you look in any classical political terms, the views you espouse, Adam, are far right. Any credibility you ever had with the viewers. I'm far right. Bill, you clearly, Adam, every week you claim that you're a sage of public opinion with your finger on the pulse because a few people come into your pub. Bill, you are deluded. You are utterly deluded. No, I think you're the one who's deluded. The audience are probably screaming at the telly right now.
Bill, the reason why the Labour Party are absolutely tanking in the polls at the moment, because they have this vision that you have, that the bell curve of opinion is completely out of whack with reality. They think that if you care about immigration and you want to stop the boats, and you want to bring down both legal and illegal migration, that makes you far right, when actually it probably puts you in the middle of the bell curve.
Not true. So hold on, Adam, you keep interrupting people.
Stop. Stop. We can conduct this debate without raising voices and getting shouty, OK? I've just been accused of being far right. No, let's have it out. I agree. Let's have it out on a sensible level, though.
And I really do understand Adam's reaction there. I really do. I mean, Adam is a great guy, by the way. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm the first person who put him on TV. And I think he has really developed an amazing career. And he's constantly put down by these vile snobs in the mainstream media who think that it's terrible that there's a pub landlord. And you saw that with Bill Rammell there and the snobbery of him, that it's terrible that there should be a pub landlord allowed to opine outside of his bar because they're so snobby. But I do wonder if we just shouldn't care about these labels that are thrown at us. Now, Adam Brooks does care, and I get it, because it's like if you used to be called a racist or a transphobe, that could end your career. But the more and more these labels are just used by the left with nothing to back it up, I would argue the less effective they become. Adam Brooks, though, was furious about this, and he responded here.
What Bill's trying to do here is dig himself out of a hole that he cannot get out of. He's now trying to get the audience back on side by spreading lies about me, saying things that I've never said and I never would say. Of course, migrants are not responsible for 70% of crime in the UK. That is impossible. One stat I have used in previous weeks is that foreign nationals are 70% more likely to commit sex crimes in the UK. That is from data pulled off the National Police computer, and it was printed in the Daily Telegraph as shown here.
He's got the receipts. And that was the thing, June. You know, what I loved about Adam Brooks is he's such a passionate guy, and he doesn't claim to be a journalist, or he doesn't claim to be a commentator, but he does his research. He's incredibly passionate. He's incredibly diligent. And clearly he was mortally offended about that far right term being thrown at him, given that, June, it is a term that in the past was connected with Nazi Germany, for example. However, remember, Bill Rammell thinks that anyone connected to Reform UK is far right. So isn't it just time we start almost like embracing the label and being like, okay, you want to call us that? Who cares?
Bill Rammell is one of the Labour MPs who suggested that the Lockerbie bomber should be released early on compassionate grounds. The Lockerbie bomber, back in the day, killed 270 people. 11 people were on the ground, and he developed prostate cancer. He was given a 27-year life sentence, and when he got discovered to be in the terminal part of his cancer, people suggested that he ought to be released. He was one of the people that was very vocal about that, which I find absolutely abhorrent. The man should not have been released. He should have been given medical treatment, and however long he lasted, he should have stayed in confinement. They estimated he had 3 months to live. Because of people like Bill campaigning for his release, he managed to leave the hospital and the confines of a prison and spend the rest of his days out in a comfortable villa in Tripoli. And he lasted 31 months. That's the sort of man Bill is, that's calling our good friend far right. And to turn around and say that you think you are someone because a few people come in your pub, Adam will be more in touch with how the country feels than that man will ever be. They're out of touch. They're out of date. It's not a bad label. You know, I got called gammon so much during Brexit. I thought, sorry. So it's on my Facebook page.
Chief Gammon, June.
Chief Gammon.
I used to use it. I used to use it when you came on my old GB News show, because I thought, let's embrace it. Do you know what I mean? Let's embrace it. Like, I mean, Howard, you're called every name under the sun these days.
Oh,
I'm
tell me who they are. Tell me who they are. I'll sort them out for you, Howard.
Thanks, Jude. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've crossed swords with Bill Rammell in the days when you were at GB News. I think I was on, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Patrick Christie's show, and I was up against him. And he didn't actually accuse me of being far right, but I was standing for London Mayor, and he was defending Sadiq Khan as the incredible person that he is for London. And I put some, facts to him, real facts to him about Sadiq Khan, the fact he's a pathological liar, all those sorts of things. I know he's not there to defend himself, before you remind me that, but Bill Rammell just was defending the indefensible. But he was still pointing the fact I was positioning myself, and he might as well have said it then, you were just a far-right thug, Howard. And that's what the sort of message I got from him. He's not a nice person to be with. I mean, people like Stephen Pound, I regularly have a punch-up with him, and he's great fun. He allows you to talk and debate, and he doesn't insult you personally. Bill Rammell's always been the complete opposite.
Yeah, there are two different types of lefties. I'll certainly give you that. There was another interesting moment on GB News this week, though, that I didn't like. And June, you may disagree with me over this one, but Rupert Lowe was on. And I am very glad to see that Rupert Lowe was on, because for a long time, GB News had actually banned him from coming on at all. This is after Nigel Farage expressed fury over the fact that his channel was covering too much of the Reform UK civil war. But what I didn't like is the fact, because remember, GB News claims that it's the free speech station, but when Rupert Lowe started speaking about his defenestration from Reform UK, which I think he absolutely has a right to talk about, and it's clearly something that's in the news, he was shut down by the presenter Martin Daubney. Watch this.
And that's what I'm turning my mind to. So talking to the Tories, I talked to all the Tories a lot. You know, they knew that the attempt to politically assassinate me was a farce.
Okay,
so
Rupert, can we stop dwelling on that, please? You've made that point now about 5 times.
But rather than being cold-shouldered, Martin, I've been talking to them. There's some great young Tories, but...
And let's talk about what that might look like. You've been quite critical of the Conservatives in the past, although you are naturally a Conservative.
Now, so Drew, my view on this is, look, I actually have no problem with GB News hiring whoever they want, okay? So I'm not one of these people that says there should be no politicians allowed to work in the media, because no one gave a damn when David Lammy had a show on LBC. So if GB News wants to give Nigel Farage a show, absolutely they should be allowed to do that. He's their star presenter. He's their top-rated presenter. He's been there since day one when he was on my show. And, you know, I'm not for a second saying that he should not have his show. But June, I think it is worrying when they claim that they're a news channel, they claim that they're a free speech station, and yet Nigel seems to be able to be setting their editorial agenda, given he is likely the next Prime Minister. That's what I don't like about it.
I don't think that's happening at all. I think they were talking to him. They wanted to obviously keep Rupert on this. I don't know, it's more than a rumour, because he's admitted to having meetings with Robert Jenrick. I got a WhatsApp about it saying that, from a Tory, saying that Rupert's having meetings with Robert Jenrick about joining the Tory party. And I just said as a quip, did he ever leave? Because he readily stood down for them in 2019. As far as I'm looking back, Rupert Lowe wasn't the one that Nigel wanted to stand down in 2019. He stood down of his own accord. He's essentially, I mean, we all are. I was just admitted, it's the Thatcherite. Me too. That's where we should be voting, but we can't, because they've dissolved into nothingness. I don't know what Rupert wants from this. Rupert wants to be a leader. That's quite clear. Rupert's got the capabilities of being a leader. I just don't think he's gone about it the right way, and currying a crowd because you sound good and you're coming out with the right statements isn't enough for me, because I've had all that from the ERG with Brexit. I've had it from Boris bloody Johnson, where I wasted so much of my time volunteering for Vote Leave and campaigning and giving up. I've 10 years, not a single payment. Day after day after day. I'm very bitter about the Tories. So, you know, you've seen what my poll came out with. 17% of the people. Rupert needs to be careful. This is a warning for Rupert. He needs to be careful.
Don't rejoin the Tories.
The Tories are ruthless. They will use a man like Rupert to destroy, or attempt to destroy, it won't happen, to attempt to destroy reform, and then they'll leave him, because what he said about immigration is just, it's just too, you know, put him on.
Look at what they did to Lee Anderson. Look at what they did to Lee Anderson. They booted him for simply challenging Sadiq Khan. By the way, though,
look what they've done to Suella Braverman.
Yes.
You know, they never. What you've got to look at with these
She's the black
Tories,
sheep in that party.
Never discussed mass deportation until they were out of power.
Yes.
They gifted power to Labour.
Totally. But at the same time, I mean, June, I totally agree with that. But my thing is, and it always has been, though, that when there are individual Tories who punch through and want to change things, for example, like Robert Jenrick, I'm going to support him. Doesn't mean that I always believe that he's right, or certainly that I'll vote for the Conservatives again. But what we have to do is shift the Overton window overall. But look, I want to just show you this amazing guy who is doing these new spoofs of James O'Brien, because O'Brien is losing the plot at the moment, right? He is just losing the plot. And it's sort of beautiful to watch. And I think sometimes we've just got to have a bit of fun with it. So watch this.
calling from Shoreditch. Glenn, what made you pick up the phone this morning?
Hi James, I'm a first-time caller. I voted for Brexit and I am ashamed to say that I got it completely wrong.
You and 17 million others, so don't worry, you're not the only one without a brain cell, mate.
I beg your pardon?
Tell us what you got wrong then, Glenn.
Well, I really believe we were going to take back control of our borders.
We've always had control of our borders, so that's a non sequitur, Glenn. What else did you naively believe?
Well, I suppose that I believe that the government will be able to get illegal immigration under control.
No, I'm going to have to cut you off again there, mate. They already could do that in accordance with EU law, despite your Auntie Doris lying through her chip-chomping teeth and telling you otherwise. But look, I don't want to get cross with you, and I'll always show contempt for the con men and compassion for the con, like inexplicably and ludicrously simple-minded individuals like you. But you carry on. What else?
Oh, I don't know. I just called in to say that I think I got it wrong, quite honestly, and I'm frankly ashamed.
So you called in thinking you were Billy Big Bananas to say, I don't know why I voted for Brexit. I know that I regret it. I still can't explain it, and I know I got it wrong, but I haven't the foggiest idea why. And all this is being said at 3 minutes past 11 on national radio.
James, I'm 95 years old and I just called to say we all make mistakes and I thought maybe you'd understand that.
Well, I'm sorry, mate. I can only show a certain amount of compassion. I've got unreserved sympathy for the gullible souls who permitted themselves to be taken in by the farrago of lies upon which Brexit was of course built. I feel a sense of perennial compassion for the Daily Mail dimwits like you who were so infatuated by the prospect of flying on a blue passport that you couldn't give a flying fig about the utter decimation of small businesses and the deportation of millions of people whose only sin was that they don't look like you.
Well, I'm awfully sorry to hear that is your opinion, James.
No, it's not my opinion, Glenn. It's incontrovertible facts.
Well, again, I guess I got it wrong, James, and I suppose you were right all along.
There it is. That wasn't so hard now, was it, Glenn? Clutching on your Zimmer frame in your nursing home. Turns out that we can be friends after all. How old did you say that you are?
I'm 95 and next month I will be 96.
Well, you live a long life, mate. 4 minutes past 11 is the time.
That's Tony Lapidus and Howard Cox. You've got to admit, I mean, a lot of people have tried to spoof this sort of nasty, vile diatribes that O'Brien puts up, but I think he's got it best, right? He's done the best.
Well, I've turned down every time to go on there because I was a victim of him when, because he's, I'm anti net zero and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I go on Nick Ferrari, he gives me a fair, because he's a bit of a petrol head, which is good. And in the days of Andrew Castle and a few others on there, I'm happy to go to LBC. But James O'Brien is a nasty piece of work. He's a horrible man. I've seen him destroy people. And that mimic just now for, pretending to be a 95-year-old, I can see him actually doing that. He was so close to the truth.
It really is. It really is. And I absolutely love the fact that sometimes we just need these comedians to come into our world and just absolutely expose the horror of that man. Breaking right now, we knew it was only a matter of time. The Loose Women have spoken out after their axe scene by woke ITV, and wait for it, you won't be surprised to learn that they blame misogynistic male executives and mansplaining for their downfall, rather than the fact that this once iconic show, which was loved by millions, has gone completely woke, pushing agendas down our throat, including, by the way, accusing me of racism for calling out their all-black panel when they believe that they should never have an all-white panel. But this hit back started with Jane Moore in The Sun this week, who wrote that the Loose Women cut sparked outburst of lazy misogyny from mainly male trolls who have no idea why the show's so important. Lawrence Fox responded, saying the UK version of The View Loose Women seems to be running out of people who can be bothered to watch it. Thoughts and prayers with those who have bills to pay and children to feed who have just lost their jobs. Welcome to the cancelled club. But it was actually Nadia Sawalha, the Loose Women columnist, who has decided to go public and acknowledge that TV is dying, that these loose women people have lost their jobs as a result of the fact that people just don't want to watch this woke bullshit anymore, but at the same time has decided to target men, male executives, and mansplaining for the fact that women are switching off from this rubbish. So we're going to get analysis on this from our superstar panel, June Slater and Howard Cox, as we go. But first, prepare the Nadia Sawalha diatribe. Let me just tell you, by the way, she's sitting next to her husband, Mark, during this, who seems at times, somewhat ironically, to be mansplaining to her. Watch.
Loose Women's Jane Moore hits out at snooty reaction to ITV's brutal daytime cuts.
Yeah, this isn't. Well, that's from somewhere actually different.
This is
isn't
in
it?
the
But this
Sun.
is. But her
Loose Women cut sparked outburst of lazy misogyny from mainly male trolls who have no idea why the show's so important.
Exactly. And then she goes on to talk about, though we aren't a political show, we have the politicians on, and they're usually very scared.
Yeah.
In fact, I seem to remember years ago
Bit
when
like me every morning.
Farage came on, and actually probably somebody would be able to find it, because there was a PAP photo of, as he came in around the back of ITV studios in his car, there was a folder with something like things to talk to women about. Yes, it was. Yes,
to talking to
yes.
women.
Somebody see now if they can find it. It was years ago. Not a guide. It was a folder.
But I like to now imagine him with a 1947 guide of how to liaise.
But it was something like that. You know, they get very nervous because they don't know what we're going to ask them, because it will be something out the blues.
Well, I'm just going to call bullshit on that one, because I actually spent a whole load of time last night looking desperately to see if Nigel Farage had ever been paparazzied going into Loose Women, holding a folder saying, this is what to talk to women about. Didn't exist. So that's made up, number one. And trust me, Nigel Farage is perfectly capable of talking to women. But Nadia Sawalha hadn't finished there. Watch.
Jane says, you know, since the cuts were announced, the amount of hostility from people that you can tell don't even watch the show, misogynistic puff, you know, and it's the way people almost hold their nose like this. You know, this show has been highly successful for 25 years.
Yes, before you went woke.
It is such a clear brand. Loose Women is mentioned. How many dramas, how many programs around the world? It is, you know, and Lorraine, how long has Lorraine been there? You know.
Well, I mean, I worked on the Lorraine Kelly show for 10 years. That was how I got my big break in TV in the United Kingdom. But unfortunately, something changed on these shows. The woke mind virus entered ITV. They sacked Piers Morgan for slagging off Meghan Markle. They told me I couldn't tell the truth about Meghan Markle. They sacked lots of white presenters and said, we have to replace you with someone who's diverse, not because of their talent, but just because we're appealing to the woke mob. So I'm sorry, I think what Nadia Sawalha and Jane Moore are missing here is that Loose Women has finished because their viewers switched off. Nadia got very emotional, though.
The brutality of the world, right? To see what a lot of people don't realize is that we're self-employed. Loose Women is self-employed. Yeah, every contract is a new contract. I could be let go tomorrow. I could be let go in 5 years. You don't know, because we're not employees. So I can't tell you anything other than I'm on for my next contract. Nobody will tell me any different. It's never been any different the whole time. But what's been brutal, absolutely brutal over the last week, and honestly, I feel tearful about it.
What's the production?
Is that hundreds of people were made redundant, are going to be made redundant out of the blue.
Hundreds.
These are all the people behind the scenes, right, that support us in every way. You cannot have one without the other. But it's just the way of the world. Inflation is insane. cuts have to be made. And I know you guys will be feeling this within your families, and with many of you will have partners or yourself have been made redundant.
No, you're completely missing the point yet again. The reason the mainstream media is failing is because the mainstream media is no longer representing the vast bulk of the population. Remember, the brilliant era of Loose Women was driven by a woman called Carol McGiffin, and Carol McGiffin left the show because her anti-woke views were no longer accepted. And so you're only representing a tiny portion of the people who used to watch your show. And these staff members who've lost their jobs, and I'm not saying some of them are not good people, I worked with some of them, but unfortunately, they have decided to perpetuate this myth that the vast majority of Brits want to go down a woke path, and we don't. Nadia does then admit that television is ending. However, she loses it later on and decides that it's mansplaining to blame for the attacks and failure of Loose Women, and, wait for it, misogynistic old men.
And I can't tell you how upsetting it was to see people just walking around numb with shock and fear about what they were going to do. And, you know, television is coming slowly, very slowly to its natural end.
Not slowly.
Like so many professions are, aren't they? And there's so many people, not just in show business or telly, that are looking at like, what am I going to do next with my life? What, you know? And so that has been so awful. That's been worse for many of us than whatever horrible things that trolls say about our shows that we all feel, you know, really protective of. So I'm so proud of Jane for just calling them out. You know, and these are a lot of newspapers writing vile things, just like they always have for the last 25, 26 years. Oh, we're to this, we're to that. You know, we're done every single day. The sidebar of hate picks up on something that somebody said or a look. You know, you hate this one, you hate that one. Just shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up. Actually, do you know what? At the moment, all of us on screen are in work and are proud of what we do. But behind the scenes, there are people that are really suffering. And what you don't realize is when you attack the show, you attack them, because you never see all the army of people behind the scenes and how hard they work. So to all my friends and colleagues behind the scenes that just got the most huge shock out of the blue, I'm so sorry. And Mark knows, don't you, how much of how upset I've been at home about it. I just can't bear it. So just be fucking kind to people, you know? And all you snooty, misogynistic, old-fashioned, mansplaining men in your tired old newspapers, shut up, or at least just watch it once from beginning to end, because that's the awful thing. You've never watched it and you have these opinions.
But also, one of the other things they seem to misunderstand and not understand is it's meant to be a show in which opinionated women express their opinions. And I would argue that so many shows on television just don't have that. You don't get that anyway. You don't get. There's no show with everything is but also everything is so blancmange and sort of average, which is why this would be my proposition. Of all the brands that ITV has, the one that lends itself best to a hugely successful digital presence, I know they have a YouTube channel, but I mean with content that's geared towards the digital market, is Loose Women. Everything that's clickbaity is people with strong opinions on all of the topics that you talk about. This is the future.
But that's what a lot of the men that are in charge of legacy media do not like. They don't want to be a difficult woman is very irritating.
I mean, June Slater, our very own Loose Women, by the way, I'm sorry, this is ludicrous. Like, I know the executive who was in charge of ITV Daytime and Loose Women for years and years and years. It's a woman, right? But it's one of these women who is on the left. She's called Emma Gormley. She's very woke. She is the one who's instigated all of these changes. So it's totally ludicrous to say, oh, this is the fault of men. Loose Women, June, has lost about half of its audience. And that's because it used to be fun. It used to be outrageous. It used to represent everyone. And they made this purposeful decision when they hired the likes of Charlene White to become politically correct and to become woke.
They need to accept they're boring. I stopped watching it because they were boring. They were boring the bloody pants off me. And I thought this was supposed to be about outspokenness and people having an opinion. And unfortunately, probably people like myself and Leilani Dowding and other outspoken women who've decided to take to social media. I mean, I cover a number of topics. I just take the rip out of people. You've got someone like that with 450,000 followers and Leilani with a couple of 100,000 followers. There's that other girl, I can't remember her name, 300,000 followers. You only need a few people like that. And people will gravitate to that because what they want, Katie Hopkins. If anybody should be on Loose Women, it's Katie Hopkins.
Totally. And she used to appear as a guest, June, which is interesting. They never quite allowed her to be a full-time Loose Woman. They would have her on as a guest. Could you imagine now? She would not get on in a million years. You wouldn't get on. Leilani wouldn't get on. No. They only put on one type of woman.
And it's and they're paying what gets me with these people, I find this really, really insane. And that is Lawrence Fox got cancelled. He was an actor. He didn't want to be in politics. It's not the place for him. He's not happy there. He'd be happy being back in acting. And Lawrence came out and said that Britain wasn't racist. And for that one comment, this hideous industry of lovies and woke people, this hideous industry. Nobody stood by him, not one actor, nobody said anything. They all kept quiet so they could keep the jobs. They took his equity card off him the day after, I think, and nobody said anything. So maybe now these people can realise that what we should have done was stand up then. Then we had a right to be who we want to be when we're in the media, rather than being this force-fed, narrative preaching, wet, woke, he said it, blancmange, vanilla, whatever you want to call it, nothingness. Carol McGiffin was one of the best ones. I always used to watch if Carol was on. I liked the way she put her information across. She was balanced. She was logical. She represented how I felt. They don't represent how I feel. They talk about, I think, are you really having this as a topic? How boring. You're boring. You've got the axe because you're boring. You're going to have to deal with it because you people like that have allowed this industry to be taken over by woke. And what do they say? Go woke, go broke. That's where you're heading.
Howard Cox. I mean, I couldn't agree more to him, by the way. Howard Cox. Don't you think Nadia is also being so actually like pretty sexist by saying yet again, this is the fault of the man. It is the mansplaining. It's the fault of the misogynistic old man. And it's like, no, the people who are writing these articles about loose women are women. The editors of the magazine that puts these bitchy articles about loose women on the covers are women. As I've just said, the boss of ITV Daytime is a woman called Emma Gormley. I think this is one of the problems and one of the reasons why people have turned on loose women, because it's like they want to say that every issue is always the fault of a man.
Well, I'm one of these white old men, sorry. I'm one of those people. And honestly, I mean, I've been in Good Morning Britain quite a lot of times, and I've been in the studio afterwards when it goes to Lorraine, they get the whole thing. And I've often been spoken to producers. They said, would you like to be on the show later? I said, well, I'm happy to, because obviously I'm doing it for the campaign. And like June, I don't do it for money. I've been doing this just to help people, have a cheaper, driving. And when I talk to them, the producer comes in and sits down with me and interviews me and says, look, what are you going to talk about? I said, well, you've asked me to be on it. What would you like to say? And this was on the Loose Women thing about female drivers and male drivers. And they were trying to split me, to put to a situation about that. And as soon as I mentioned, I don't believe in there's a climate change crisis or we don't need net zero. As soon as I say that, oh, thank you very much. It's very nice of you to be on. Bye-bye. So you're dead right, Dan. I mean, there's no way a man, especially a white man, can actually do anything on ITV in the morning times anymore.
100%. Well, I was really disgusted the other day, and I actually broke the story. Sammy Woodhouse, who has been an incredible force. She's a force, isn't she? She's now on Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry. She previously had appeared on Loose Women. There she was, right? She was there, and they put her forward as a Rotherham survivor. Now, she was booked, right, to appear on Loose Women, and she was on the train on the way down. And I knew Sammy, and I just said, they're not going to have you on. This is not going to happen. You will not end up on that show, because since your last appearance, you have gone on to work for Tommy Robinson and Urban Scoop. But she obviously took what they were saying for granted, and she'd been on the show before. What happened, Howard? On the way down, they cancelled her. They lied about the reason for cancelling her. They said, oh, we're going to do the entire episode on Linda Nolan. Don't worry, we'll book you again, because Linda Nolan had died the night before. It was all rubbish. They did one tiny segment on Linda Nolan. There were lots of other guests. And guess what? Sammy Woodhouse has not been booked again. And I think that shows you where they're at.
Well, I've got to know Sammy a little bit through Rupert and what they're doing, and she's a tour de force. She's an incredible person, and with her background, she's worth listening to.
Absolutely, and they should have had her on, June. But this is the point. They will only have now guests or topics that fit their worldview. So, for example, on the day, June, of that historic Supreme Court ruling, remember, where the rights of biological women were protected and enshrined in law, Loose Women didn't cover it at all. The next day they came on, and they'd clearly thought about it a lot, and they said, oh, this is a really difficult issue to talk about. And it's like, it shouldn't be, should it? Shouldn't 5 women on, or 4 women on a panel, shouldn't this be your issue?
Well, this is how batshit bonkers it gets. I mean, what's she called? Yasmin, wittering on
Yasmin Alibi Brown.
I have a friend who's trans. I see her on Facebook. You wouldn't know. She's slender, slim, small. You wouldn't know. And she messaged me because she knows what I'm like. And she said, listen, darling, I hope you don't mind, but I shall still be using the ladies. No one will know. I'm going in for a pee and that's it. And I laughed at that because I thought, well, you'll get away with it because no one would question you. You look like a girl. But she doesn't believe it should be the God-given right. And she's absolutely mortified at how politicised trans issues have become. She went through all this on her own. She had a sex change many years ago when you didn't get any support. There was nothing there. She doesn't believe that it's a God-given right, and that, these men, some criminals have actually come out as trans after they've got arrested. There was one in Scotland. He wasn't trans beforehand. This will get abused. So the court ruling is absolutely essential. Men are men, and women are women. And you need that dividing line because people...
Yes, of course you do.
People who are trans necessarily,
of
people
course you
will
do.
abuse
but
the
it's
opportunity.
the fact, June, that a show called Loose Women was actually too scared to discuss that. But look, we'll give the last word to our Loose Women. Nadia Sawala, watch this.
When these newspapers just dismiss us all as just like, I don't know what, old bags, as Jane says in her piece, old bags. Sorry, we cannot identify with what you are talking about there, because when you say that to us, you're also saying that to our audience, don't you? You do realise that you're insulting our audience and potentially the people that buy your newspaper.
I just honestly don't think it's what it's about. I think it's a very intellectually dishonest argument, if I'm totally honest. But thank you to my superstar panel today. She certainly isn't an old bag or a loose woman. June Slater, thank you so much. And of course, make sure you follow June on Facebook and subscribe to her YouTube page for so much more of this. And Howard Cox, who is, of course, the head of the Fair Fuel campaign, former Reform UK mayoral candidate, and who knows, maybe we'll be hearing more from Howard Cox in the political space in the weeks to come, and I know he'll be back to tell us much more about that. Thank you both so much. Have a wonderful weekend. But now, of course, it is time to reveal the worst Britain in the world this week, and I've loved your comments on this one. Cole M2C said, difficult to choose out of these, all would get the vote, but I'd pick Wokey Lineker. He's wanted removing off the football for a while now. It needed freshening up. Meg Gardio wrote, Gary should have his England caps and goals record stripped. He's a traitor to the country. But PST 101 said Narinder is just a massive troll and people just eat it up. She don't believe half the shit she says, but wants to be in the spotlight. That's all. She wants to be Katie Hopkins in reverse. So a reminder, the nominees. This is where we take Union Jackass throughout the week and put them head to head. On Monday, it was Gary Lineker after his BBC exit. On Tuesday, it was Narinder Kaur for her rude comments about Tommy Robinson. Wednesday, scheming Sturgeon. And Thursday, John Swinney. This is all over the madness about the SNP just going for Reform UK. And I can now reveal the winners. In fourth place with 7% of the vote, Scottish First Minister John Swinney. In third place with 11% of your vote, Scheming Sturgeon. But this was very tight. Your runner-up with 37% of the vote, Narinder Kaur, which means the worst Briton in the world this week, according to Outspoken viewers, with 44%, is Gary Lineker. And I have to say amen to that. I fully agree with your decision. Thank you for your company all week. We've had such a good one, by the way. One more show, though, coming up on Substack. I'd love you to join us there, www.outspoken.live. Meghan Markle's mortifying podcast extension for a special guest. Note, she hasn't secured Beyonce, but rather her mother, Tina Knowles. Angela Levin, we're going to have some good fun with this one. She is standing by. So at this stage, we come off YouTube and Rumble. We move to our own platform on Substack, www.outspoken.live. We are back live Monday, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Have a wonderful weekend. I hope you have lots and lots of fun. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting.